Shalom Havarim. Hello friends. Good to be with you on this Sunday or whenever you are watching. Heard a story this week about a pastor who was on an airplane flight several months ago, back when you could fly places, and sat by a young man, had a lot of questions for the pastor, a lot of questions about Christianity, questions about religion, and they just had this wonderful conversation, as always happens, when you're seated by a stranger on an airplane. They had a wonderful conversation, and as they're there flying across the United States, the young man turns to the pastor and says, "What is to keep me from being baptized right here and right now?" And the pastor said, "Absolutely nothing." They got some water from the stewardess, baptized him right there on the airplane. Yeah, you know what? It was a real blessing in disguise. That didn't happen, but it's funny. Blessing in disguise. All right, so friends, we are beginning year B in the lectionary cycle, and that means the next few months, the next 12 months, are going to focus on the Gospel of Mark. And Mark is a different sort of gospel. It's shorter than the other ones. It kind of cuts right to the point. There's less narrative, less stories. It's very, very kind of this straight to the point kind of text. And you look at Mark's gospel, there's no birth narrative. It doesn't talk about when Jesus was born. There's no taking the young Jesus to the temple for dedication. There's no story of how Mary and Joseph forgot Jesus years later at the temple. You know where Mark begins? It begins with a grown man, Jesus. And I love the way the text starts. I'm going to read verse 1 for you here. Mark begins by saying, "The beginning of the good news about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God." Seems like a very simple statement up front, but this is actually like Mark's thesis for the entire book of Mark. This is his purpose for writing. This is what he's going to be writing about. And it's kind of dense if you think about it. It needs some unpacking. So let's do that real quick here. Okay, so he says the beginning of the good news. And I know that we all like to receive good news. Good news is a good thing. The word in Greek is euangelion. And we often anglicize that. You've probably heard the word evangel. Sometimes we talk about evangelizing or the evangelical church. It's simply the Greek word euangelion, and it means good news. Now, the euangelion was not unique to Mark. He didn't invent the word by any means. He's actually using a practice found in the Roman system. Whenever a new king was born, the heir to the throne was born, or if the Romans would overtake another land, like dominate them through military power, they would send out messengers with these letters, these pronouncements, telling everyone that a new king was born, or that you have a new king because you were just overtaken by the Romans. So this was called the euangelion, the good news. The good news is you have a new king. Whether it was by birth or through domination, when the messengers were sent out with these papers, these pronouncements, they were sent out to deliver the euangelion, sent out to deliver the good news. Okay, so Mark then spends the next 18 chapters unpacking what it means that Jesus is the king. Now, in this sentence, he goes on to say that Jesus is the Messiah. Let's just keep going with the languages today. There might be a theme here. In Hebrew, the word is Mashiach, and there's a Greek equivalent. It's Christos. It's where we get these English words Messiah and Christ from. They're roughly this equivalent to one another. Now, sometimes this word gets kind of taken out of context. Messiah or Christ, it means the anointed one. And there are times throughout the Bible that people other than Jesus are referred to as Mashiach or Christos. For instance, Cyrus, the King Cyrus in the Old Testament, is referred to as the Messiah. David, like whenever David is anointed as the next king of Israel, he's called the Mashiach. So this simply means that you are anointed, you are chosen for a purpose by God. Now the next phrase takes it even further. It says in Mark 1, it says, the Son of God. So yes, David was called the Anointed One, and yes, Cyrus was called the Anointed One. Other ones have been called the Anointed One, but this is a unique situation. David, yes. Cyrus, yeah. But they didn't come close to what Jesus is. Jesus is not just a human chosen by God. He's the very Son of God, the flesh of God, God incarnate. So we've got all of this going on here in just the first verse of Mark. The beginning of the good news, the euangelion, about Jesus the Messiah, the chosen one, the anointed one, who is not just any anointed one, he is the Son of God. All right, so that's just one verse in Mark's gospel, and already I've got the chills. All right, let's go on. Where does Mark go from that introduction? Well, he launches right into the story of Jesus' baptism. And I love this story because John's out there, he's baptizing in the Jordan River. He's calling people to repent, to turn their lives around and turn back to God. And Jesus comes to the river and he's baptized as well. And as he comes up out of that river, there's this voice that comes from heaven as a dove descends upon him. And this voice says, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." And the thing I like about that is, if you don't believe that Mark was onto something here when he said that Jesus was the Son of God, this voice from heaven, we assume God speaking. God confirms it. This isn't any old anointed one. You are my Son. With you I am well pleased. Whew. All right. So I don't think it's by accident that that Mark makes this transition, that he goes quickly from in the beginning, the good news about Jesus, the Messiah, the Son of God, to the baptism of Jesus. These are meant to be a unit. They flow together. So here we go. Baptism is more than just this meaningless ritual. I mean, if you've seen baptism, you maybe have experienced it yourself. You see somebody, they either kneel in front of the church or they go down into the water somewhere and they're raised up. Maybe they're dunked 3 times. Maybe they're poured water over their head. It's done in different ways. But it's more than just this ritual. Baptism is a sign to the rest of the world that you are a follower of Jesus Christ, and that you are now a part of the good news. Did you catch that? You are a part of the good news. Baptism does not mean that you will never have any more temptations. Believe me, that's not true. You will still experience temptation. Jesus went from his baptism and was tempted in the desert. It doesn't mean that you won't fail. It doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. Your baptism, your vows, this public demonstration of your faith is a sign to the watching world that says, I am a part of the good news that Jesus is the Messiah, that Jesus is the Son of God. Now, one of my favorite stories, and I told this story, I figured it up, it's 7 years ago, so maybe those of you that have heard it will have forgotten that I told it before. It's a story of Martin Luther. And we know Martin Luther, he was the guy that nailed the 95 Theses to the church door and kind of kick-started the Protestant Reformation. So there's a story that after Luther had posted his 95 Theses, he went before a council and they found him guilty of inciting heresy, and he was kind of exiled. He had to kind of be away. He couldn't teach anymore. He was removed from his position, and he ended up spending his time in the Wartburg Castle. And I know that sounds really rough, right? He got exiled to a castle. But he had to stay there. And how do you spend your time when you're in exile? Well, Luther spent his time translating the Bible from the original languages into the contemporary German language. Now that meant that Luther had a lot of late nights and early mornings writing, translating from this ancient Greek text into this contemporary German language. And that means he had a lot of time to think about all that he had done, to think about how he was criticized for all of those theses that he posted and for inciting all of this uprise among the people. So he had this time there to sit and think, and then even as he's doing this translation, surely he's asking, am I doing this right? Is this worth doing? Because it wasn't commonly accepted for the Bible to be in the common language of the people. So during this time, Luther is experiencing all of these questions. He's tempted. Should I recant my position? If I do, I'd be able to go home, be able to be in my former position. And there's stories of how Luther would get so frustrated as he was being tempted with all these questions as he's translating this Bible that he would just throw things and yell. And the story is that he used to take his ink pot, you'd have that feather quill in the ink pot, and he used to throw it against the wall and shatter it. And he would yell 3 words in German. He would yell, Ich bin getauft. Ich bin getauft, which simply translates as, I am baptized. As he's feeling tempted, questioning whether what he has done is right, he yells out, I am baptized. I am a part of the good news. And you see, whenever you are a part of the good news, you will come up against people who oppose what you're doing. You will come up against people who are toxic, who have toxic beliefs that wish to take away from the things that you are doing. But every time Luther came up to those people, and every time he experienced the temptation to recant and give up what he had started, he would yell out, Ich bin getauft. I am baptized. I am a part of the good news. Now, far too often, I feel like Christians get their wires crossed. We are called to be a part of the good news, and I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes we find ourselves a part of the bad news. Perhaps we misunderstood the message somewhere along the way. I'm not sure. But of course, I say all of this in the wake of the events that took place this past Wednesday. Now, I don't even know how to describe what went on. Surely you experienced this as well, just this flooding of emotions and questions in the wake of what happened at the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Was it an attempted coup? Was it insurrection? This occupation of the Capitol? I don't know what to call it other than to say it was an embarrassment in front of the other nations. I think it was a threat to democracy and a threat to human life. As of right now, on Saturday, I think there were 5 different people who lost their lives in that event. When all these people rushed the Capitol building, as the people were inside, as Congress was in session, we saw these images on our phones and televisions and our computers, and I just remember being moved by these images in a bad way. And several of them stuck with me, just for all of the negative aspects of that image. And one of the ones that struck me the most was an image of a person standing up on the Capitol building after breaching the line and approaching the building and going up on top of it. They held up a sign that said, Jesus saves. Now, here's the thing. I think Jesus saves, and I think it's wonderful to get that message out. But I'm not sure that in that moment that they were the best representatives of what it means for Jesus to save. Something seems off. As you proclaim to be a follower of Jesus, the one who taught us to turn the other cheek, to give your cloak to someone who has none, to go the extra mile. The very guy that told Peter to put away his sword, they're standing up there trying to overthrow Congress with a sign that says Jesus saves. And we can talk about theology and ideology and politics all we want until we're blue in the face, but that's not really what I'm trying to do here. What I saw there on that Wednesday was nothing short of political idolatry. And it's trying to take the name of Jesus and slap it on whatever you're trying to do and get God to bless you and your actions. And to me, that looked like Constantine. When Constantine was in battle in the 4th century, he took the soldiers' shields and he painted Christian symbols on those shields and told them to go out and conquer their enemies. And for me, this just doesn't line up with the Jesus that we see in the Bible. Yes, everybody has the right to freedom of speech in the United States. I think it's fine that people are protesting and making their opinions heard. But there's a disconnect there. When you attempt to overthrow Congress, when you attempt to overrun the Capitol building, it doesn't seem much like Jesus to me. I don't question their commitment to Jesus, but I do question the actions. And I think that we all need to be reminded, Ich bin getauft. I am a part of the good news because I am baptized into it. So we make this in the plural. It's not just me. I'm not the only one that's been baptized. The plural is wir sind getauft. As we talk about the United States, let's put it in the German. Wir sind getauft. We are baptized. We are a part of the good news. Now, I admit that my hands are not clean. I see so many people doing the whole Pilate thing, washing their hands of this and saying, it was on you guys. But I realize that every time I participate in divisive conversations, every time I point my finger at someone else without realizing, like we were taught in elementary school, that there's 3 fingers pointing back at me, every time I try to blame other people for the problems I see around me, I'm part of the problem. So I need to pause and ask how I have contributed to these events that we've seen. I need to remember, Ich bin getauft. I am a part of the good news, not a part of the bad. The baptism of Jesus and our baptism, if you are baptized, isn't just a meaningless routine or a ritual. It is our public declaration to the watching world that we are a part of the good news, that we are a part of Jesus Christ and his movement, that he is the Messiah, that he is the Son of God, that he is the Savior of the world. And Martin Luther knew that as he was experiencing those temptations, he yelled out those words, Ich bin getauft. And we can yell today, Wir sind getauft. We are baptized. We are a part of the good news. So of course today I want to leave you with some good news. I was just kind of scrolling through some of the stories on a news website, and I came across the story of Andy Kim. Andy Kim is a congressman, and there was a story about him and the events that took place this past Wednesday. So Kim was at the Capitol building late into the night Wednesday, early into the morning Thursday. He was a part of a few different discussions, and then as he was trying to clear his head, he went out for a walk. And he's walking around, he comes to the rotunda, and he sees some workers cleaning up the debris from earlier in the day. So he asked those workers if he could help. And we only know this story because another senator or another congressperson was walking around at the same time. It was 1 a.m., and they snapped a picture of Andy Kim down on his knees wearing a suit. It was a lovely suit, this blue blazer and blue pants. He's down on his knees picking up trash and putting it in a bag. And this other congressperson said, he wasn't doing this for publicity. He didn't even know I was there. There weren't photographers there. I just took this picture of him on my phone. In the middle of all that ugliness, in the middle of all of that bad news, Andy Kim provided some good news. And I was thinking about that. It's like I don't know anything about this guy. I hadn't heard of him until this morning when I found this story. I don't know what his politics are like, but I do know a thing or two about his character. And I started to think, this guy's probably a Christian. And you know what? Sure enough, he is. He's a Presbyterian. You guys have a couple good ones out there too in the Presbyterian world. So I thought, let's put in the third person about Andy Kim. Ist getauft. I knew that guy was a part of the good news. All right, friends. It's been a challenging week. You're probably asking a lot of questions, and I know that I am as well. You're probably trying to dig through all these emotions and understand the things that you're feeling and trying to figure out what is right and what is wrong and trying to understand the conspiracy theories and the good reporting and which is which. I know that you're going through that because I know that I'm going through all that as well. This may not be an easy week for us, but what I want you to remember is Ich bin getauft. Wir sind getauft. I am baptized. You are baptized. We are a part of the good news. May it be so.